Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
Hey, he just said hello this time. That's good. And this is where we answer your cycling and triathlon related questions that you submit at trainerroad.com/podcast. We appreciate you submitting them. There were some great ones this week. We went through that list and built up some questions that we feel like could make for some interesting and informative conversation. Did some research on them, and it's going to be great. We're happy that you're with us. Thanks for joining us live, too. You can do that on Facebook and YouTube. It's usually Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, like we're recording right now. Sometimes it changes. And to stay tuned for updates on that, you can just check out forum.trainerroad.com. Stay tuned to our social channels, that sort of a thing, and then you can follow through with that. Before we get into the questions, a few things. First of all, congratulations to Rose Grant. She won cross-country marathon nationals with a massive margin. This is big for her. She's number one. She rides for the Stands Pivot team, presented by Maxxis. We're also a team sponsor of that team as well, and so she's a TrainerRoad user, and she has been struggling for the past 3 years with some pretty severe injuries, shoulders, knees, everything else. So this is a really big thing coming back for her. So really exciting.
How much did she win by?
I think she won by 6 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they had
That's huge.
And congrats to all the athletes there. It sounded like a brutal day because they had rains that almost disqualified the race beforehand. And then they just had crazy conditions. Sounds like it was a really hard, technical, long marathon race. So good job, Rose. Way to go. And to all the athletes that did that. And then some good lucks need to go out because Grand Junction Off-Road is this weekend. We know a lot of you are doing that because a lot of you send out questions about that race. And to the Stands Pivot team, since we're a team sponsor, good luck to Sophia, who will be doing that, and to Rose once again. They'll be at that race. Good luck to those doing the Cascade Classic. We have Brandon, our product manager, is going to do that. Fingers crossed. That goes well for him. And then Keegan Swenson and Chloe Woodruff, the other Stands Pivot team members, they are going to be at the first cross-country World Cup in Albstadt, Germany, which should be pretty interesting too. So anyways, good luck to all of you. If you're racing at some local race, good luck to you as well.
How does somebody watch that while they're working out on the trainer?
Yeah, because they're kind of fun to watch, huh?
So much fun to watch.
Yeah, it's on, I think, so redbull.tv. And then if you go to live events, then you'll see the World Cup is scheduled on there, and you can click on that and watch it.
And you can download that app too on Android or iOS, and it's free.
Yeah.
And there's are there commercials or no commercials?
Every once in a while, there's house ads for Red Bull. So there's 3 house ads.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's really good coverage, and there's camera angles all over the course, and
really good commentary.
Yep,
good resolution, good quality.
Yeah, it's
highly recommend.
Yeah, it's great. So I know that's something that we always talk about, the different entertainment things that we use on the trainer. When I'm doing Pettit or when I'm doing Baxter, those sort of rides like that, they're really great. And watch.
Sometimes too, if it's really hard interval. Even just the cognitive load of the commentators is too much. But so you listen to music, but then you can just see it. And it's just something about when you watch professionals do something, you get into the zone, right?
Yeah.
I think we've all done that where you see someone attacking and then you're like, I'm attacking too.
Yeah, I'm as good as them. And then, reality hits every once in a while, but it's nice to live in that distortion field for a bit. And this is going to be, and I know that we usually don't talk about pro racing very much on this thing, but I'm really excited to see how this season shakes out for mountain biking, particularly. I think it's going to be really interesting racing this year, more so than previous years. So,
did something happen to Nino?
Because he's not so dominant so far.
Yeah, he's not so dominant so far this year, and I think that there are more people that are coming in that can challenge him. Matthew Vanderpool, he's had a decent, okay year, I'd say.
It's going to be really fun to watch.
So that'll be, and then on the women's side, I genuinely have no clue who will win. Kate Courtney is really fast. She just beat Yolanda Neff. Longvod's fast. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. So if you don't watch mountain biking or you don't like mountain biking, we apologize for that short excerpt. We'll continue on.
More mountain biking.
Yeah, actually, we will. So some takeaways. You raced this weekend, and both of us raced this weekend, and we also raced this week as well. So we can share on that really quick. We had cross-country state champs, and if you're not watching, I'm doing that. I say that air in quotes. That manner because I'm doing air quotes. I don't think it wasn't an actual state championship, even though it always is usually every year, but they didn't apply for it to be in time. So regardless, pre-riding is super important. That's my first takeaway that I want to share. I know we've talked about this before, but I knew these trails, so I could have very easily said, I don't need to pre-ride. But dirt goes through this weird cycle and this weird kind of progression throughout the year. And every area is different. And what I mean by that is in the winter, you have, a layer of moisture sitting over the top, a lot of freezing and cooling and melting. And it creates like almost a cement-like surface on top of the dirt, at least in this region. So when you ride the trails in the very early spring, late winter, they're really fast. It's almost like you're riding on concrete. But then enough people ride it, and then it gets hotter and drier, and that starts to crumble. And that when that really hard layer starts to crumble, it becomes like an anti-friction layer. It's extremely slippery. And that's the phase we're in right now. After that, it kind of gets brushed away to the sides of the single track and it gets grippy again. And then you uproot all the tiny rocks and it gets soft again. It's kind of tricky.
It's like beach sand on concrete.
Yeah.
Just walking and you can slip on that and then try biking on it and turning.
Yeah, like put rock salt on your dinner table and then tap dance away. That's what's going to happen, right? It's really slippery. And I rode this and kind of freaked out because on the first lap that I rode through, I was like, man, I feel like I can't even turn. I know you felt like that too, even on race day. You said like it was just so hard, right?
Yeah, but any surface. It'd be like that for me. So you do you.
So like I ended up testing out 17 and 18 PSI on the next day pre-riding. And I think...
What with tires, sorry?
Yeah, that's a good point. 2.25 Maxxis Aspens on 29-inch wheels.
And you typically run what pressure?
2021.
Okay.
So it's a big drop. Yeah. And I'm on NV M525 wheels. So those are 25 millimeter internal width. Those are the important details on that, and tubeless. So... but with that, I dropped all the way down to 17, 18. I was worried because there were a couple rocky sections on that course where I felt like it would be really easy to pinch flat if I was wrong, if I took a bad line. But anyways, the pre-riding allowed me to figure out that relative weakness I felt like and then assess or address it, test it out. I rode the course just, 2 laps 2 days before and then a lap the day before to kind of test these things out. But it's super important. And then on low pressure... on tires, something to remember, we had a day where it started out cool and then it got pretty warm throughout the race. And you always want to start your pressure lower than what you want it to be at the end of the race, right? So I started out at 17, 18, and I finished actually, and who knows, because I don't know how much air actually escapes when I hook my pump on there. But when I put the gauge on afterward, it was 19 and 20 PSI. So if you had tire whizzes, then you'd be able to figure it out.
Chad bought us tire whizzes. I haven't installed it yet, but this is a good advertising for it. For those who don't know, it's a SRAM. Cork made it for SRAM, but good, same company.
All same company. Yeah.
And it's like a little, you replace your valve with this, and you can get live readings of your pressures on your head unit.
Yep.
And y'all say that's for like the really data nerds, but
very nice.
The nice thing about it is what Jonathan said, excuse me, at the end of a ride, you're like, that pressure was perfect for this.
Yes.
You never really know.
And when you hook up your pump, you don't know how much air escapes.
Exactly. So,
and a half PSI makes a big difference when you're talking about larger volume tires.
And mountain biking, like you said, it starts at 50 degrees, and then later on, especially like a marathon thing, it could be 80, 90 degrees, and if you're in the mountains.
Could have gotten some form of flat. I'm looking down thinking, is my tire leaking? Is my tire? It feels like it's losing air, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You could actually
and
see.
In a race,
that little question sitting in your head distracts and causes issues.
Yeah, I've looked down. You look down. You're like, oh, do I have a flat?
Yeah,
and you go off the trail.
Soft,
and then you go, yes, I've done the same. I've done the same. Yeah, so anyways, that was one thing that I started at 17, 18. I didn't dare start any lower because at that point I still felt like in corners that had G outs, meaning that like you kind of accelerate into it and it's a lot of G force coming through and then you come out. I felt like at 17, 18 PSI, I kind of lacked a lot of support. So I didn't want to go any lower because I was worried I'd burp the tire or tear it off the rim. So it is what it is, but when it rose up to 19, 20 by the end of the race, it sure felt a lot more slippery. That's just kind of how it goes. But if you don't have to drop that low, it's just something to keep in mind that you can start lower if it's going to get hotter throughout the day. As far as how much it rises, that totally depends on the heat, the tire itself, the volume inside, plenty of other factors. So I don't know that answer.
Altitude figure into that?
Yeah, altitude would have to figure into that too, I'm sure. So I don't know that answer. That's something that we should all try to figure out, and I don't know how to figure it out quite yet. Then the other thing, the last bit, or 2 last bits, my dropper post cable snapped when my seat post was halfway down on the first lap. So that's like the worst case scenario. It's fine if it snaps when it's up, but if it snaps when it's like halfway down or down at any point, then that's tricky. I had to stop 4 times to put my seat post back up into the high position and ride with it. But the thing that I noticed was when that snapped, I went through like probably 30 seconds, maybe a minute of that race, running through like trying to scramble for a plan B. Like, what do I do now?
Could you not just pull it up?
And no, the cable snapped. So the seat post is locked into position and it's lower, right? And it would have been fine if it snapped high, whatever, just ride it high post. But, you know, it was low. But the big thing was I was spending like a minute in my head, like scrambling, thinking like, what do I do? What do I do? And being race brained and everything else, you don't think very clearly. I was not descending as well as I should have as a result of that. So I feel like having a plan B in place is huge. Like we should think about the mechanicals that we could have and understand what to do. And on Z sometimes.
Or just no plan, just wing it.
Yeah, exactly. And in this case, I had to stop and raise the saddle to that point. But I know this sounds silly, but it did take a lot of mental energy to get to the point where I knew what I was going to do and then to do it. And I feel like if I just would have known, I need to think, I'm going to go through my bike this weekend when I clean it.
But see, that's an impossible thing. That's an
and
impossible thing to plan for. You can't plan for a snapped, I mean, all the things that could go wrong with your bike,
Sure.
you can't plan for every single one of them.
Well, I'm going to be kind of nerdy. And this weekend when I wash my bike, I'm going to look at everything.
Sure.
I'm going to be like, what do I do if this breaks? Just because I want to kind of know in my head. So then I have that stored. Just because then I won't have to waste mental energy and possibly go off the trail.
I do that too, and it's just the answer is DNF. It's real easy.
There's my excuse.
Yeah. The last takeaway I wanted to share was so because of those mechanicals, I was far back off the leader, but this course had really long line of sight. For over an hour, I could see him, but he would pull me on the climbs and then I'd pull him on the descents, and it was very like mentally excruciating or psychologically excruciating to see him up the road but not be able to catch him.
Justin Thomas?
No, he was in a league ahead.
He was in the pro field.
Yes, yeah, he was in the pro field, but he was also physically a league ahead.
Yeah.
His climbing was just insane. But anyways, instead of focusing on the rider in front of me, at one point I made the decision to just focus on every foot of the course. And instead of trying to jam it as hard as I could to get close to the guy and lose my patience and then blow up and probably just lose him for the race, I just looked at every foot and I thought, how can I be as efficient as possible? Like keep my power where it needs to be, but be as efficient as possible every single foot.
Yeah, so you made the race about you rather than about him.
Yep. Yeah, and I've called it digging before on this podcast, but with motocross, I started to think of things when I was a kid like, okay, I'm spending 25 feet braking or 25 feet coming into this turn on the brakes. I could probably get all that braking done in 10 feet. So that way I could, if you look at the feet that I spend, I could be going faster over a portion of those feet, right? And I started thinking in that regard, not jamming it into turns, but through a rocky section, I was looking at the absolute smoothest line that I could do. I was, really trying to do that. And I think that it helped because I ended up snagging the win in the last turn. So
you won by less than a second.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. It was right there basically on the line. So anyways, I just think that that's like a thing. If you feel overwhelmed by a person right in front of you, just stop and break it down to smaller things and you can kind of.
Does that mean you're state champ?
Well, it wasn't
Not
a state champ.
Ish. I'll put that down on my palmares, right? Yeah. Ish. State champ-ish. Nate, takeaways?
Okay, I got 35 of them. Just kidding. It's so funny. It's such a different experience than you. I'm going to speak to all of my less than ideal handling cycling brethren out there.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny you're talking about do this and brake less, and I'm thinking about not dying. And there's this point that happens with mountain biking that I think that happens with a lot of people is once you get over a certain level of fear, all your skills go out. And the reason
Once
why
the fear rises to a certain point, you're saying,
Yep.
yeah, the skill goes, yes. Yeah,
and then
totally.
you're like a newbie and everything's bad. And the part that scared me, it was slippery. So that was kind of sketchy. More slippery than I've ever seen that mountain.
Yep.
But we're on this bench cut place where if you did bring your front tire off, you're going down a hill. Like you're toppling.
I know exactly the part you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, or you can also hit your bars on the other side of the mountain.
Yeah. So bench cut means that you have a hill and the single track is cut into the side of the hill.
Yep.
So you've got a steep drop I shouldn't say drop. You got a steep, very steep incline on one side where you can fall down. And then you've got, a shelf next to you in a lot of spots. And it usually contours on hills. So you've got these points where you're kind of like bending around these little flutes.
And ideally, the bench cutting is level, right?
Not off camber. Well, it's usually off camber because you're turning.
Not ideally, but yes. Yeah, it does tend to be off camber, just like you said.
Yeah, so you're turning, if you fall to the left, you're turning right on a downhill turn, but it's off camber and it's slippery.
Yeah.
So all that stuff, it was not enjoyable.
That's like the perfect storm of everything you don't want.
Yeah, on the first climb, I think it was in a different class than you, but I was like 8 seconds slower than you on the first climb.
Yeah.
I looked at Strava, and then everything else, not even close. So I have a lot of work to do. I got to get if you can get your skills into a level where that doesn't scare you, that's good. But I'm not sure if ever whether 4 inches is a hospital trip. That's always scary to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to contact the shred shaman.
Yes,
And-
Lee McCormick.
Yes.
Yes.
And I almost
Shred
went to
Shaman.
Moab this weekend to do a class with him, but I have to break it down, and this is what everyone else should do too. If you're not the best, you're not a Jonathan. Break it down into steps. I need instruction. It took me years to figure out. You don't turn by turning your handlebars. You turn by leaning your bike. No one ever told me that. How are you supposed to just know that?
I was telling him, I feel like I told him that, but I don't know. It didn't register maybe.
Maybe you said it once, like in the hallway back in 2011.
Just passing by.
Lean your bike, Nate. I was like, okay. But yeah, so that's it.
Yeah. TT?
Tough day.
Yeah, that
Tough
happens.
day, Nate.
But speaking to that happens to absolutely everybody. And it's not just like your fear level. Like you might get to a point where your fear level doesn't go up, but you make a mistake and you suddenly doubt yourself a lot.
Oh yeah, I've done that too.
And then you just get to the point where you're like, you don't feel like you're doing anything right. And it's really frustrating. And in those moments when that happens, like I feel like, I know this sounds silly, but breathing and making sure that you kind of really focus on mentally resetting, that's all you can do. It's hard because most of the time it doesn't work for me. I just kind of get in a funk and it's hard to get out of.
Yeah.
On the TT, we did a TT this weekend. Geiger, not the workout, but its namesake, a hill climb. And it's a local hill climb that Greg LeMond used to use as a benchmark, or so goes the tale. And it's a really tough climb. We've had Pro Tour riders show up and do that climb. And I think the fastest time was like 29 minutes, something like that, 28 minutes.
Lorenz Tendam did it.
Oh, 27 something.
Oh, wow,
Bobby
27,
Julik
huh?
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've
so
had some
Greg
fast riders.
mythically. I mean, we still don't know his time. We
still
can
don't
only
know how he did
speculate.
it. Yeah, exactly. No Strava back then for Greg, unfortunately. But anyways, some takeaways from the TT. It's a hill climb TT, so we did it on road bikes, not TT bikes. The time is fast enough that you might be able to benefit in some, or the speed is fast enough that you might be able to benefit in some sections by using a TT bike, but overall I think it might be slower just because it would probably be a little heavier. Average is about 6%. And it's about, for us, it's somewhere around 35 minutes usually is roughly what the time is. A fast cyclist would do it under 40. And then, and if you go under 35, that's really tough. So, okay, first, I didn't go into this. I'm in daddy daycare this week, single parent, wife is traveling. So I did not do any openers. I didn't do any training before this. And I was kind of worried about how I'd feel. And I paced too conservatively, I feel like, because I was able to, in the last 2 minutes of the effort, I tried to do 305 was my goal for wattage. And in the final 2 minutes, I did 370 almost. And that wasn't like I peaked and then I like fizzled to the line. It just kept ramping up as I got closer to the line. So I feel like I left something on the table. I probably could have pushed a little bit more. But that's the funny thing about threshold is that 305, it still felt like I was dying. But I feel like I could have probably died a little more and still been okay, if that makes sense. Like I probably could have pushed up between 310, 315, somewhere around there, and still been okay by the finish. But that's the way threshold just always kind of feels like you're dying when you're holding it that
threshold's
long.
it's a range on any day, anyways.
Yep.
Within a few percent, a few watts.
Yep. The other thing is momentum is super key on undulating climbs. This climb has some spots where it kind of like undulates in pitch, and it's very easy when you go over the top of something to kind of ease up, or when it's slightly flat to not stay on top of your wattage.
The lowest hanging fruit in those situations is pushing over that hill. Because if you want to back off, wait till you have a little bit of gravity working in your favor, rather than it's still resisting you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much to be gained there, both in a race, in a time trial, just really in any situation where performance is a matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think with when you go into those sections when you're rolling over the top of something like that, like if you look at your power, chances are you're going to be putting out way less power than you think when you're going on those flat sections or slightly downhill sections. But when you end up, holding that power, I feel like you carry so much more momentum.
Yeah, the benefit you get by pushing through that particular section will outweigh the benefit you'll get by trying to drill the descent.
Yeah, I completely agreed. And then finally, the JV kick. That's a term that Brandon...
I've never heard.
Yeah, that Brandon, one of our product managers, has. But the JV kick is something that he says when you are basically like, you get to the end of a race and then you just kick it up a bunch. And he calls it the JV kick because it's kind of like, yeah, if you're inexperienced, you would do that. If you're experienced, you'd pace well. But thinking about it, on those final kicks like that, it should feel like you're kicking up. But if you look at your power, if you've paced it really, really well, it probably isn't kicking up all that much, or at least not in relation to how rough it feels.
Your perceived exertion might go through the ceiling, but if your performance jacks way up, especially when we're talking a couple minutes worth of effort, you probably underpaced.
Oh, yeah. Nate, how about you? What were your takeaways? You look completely gassed at the top.
No takeaways.
No takeaways.
Just TT.
Just pushing
I didn't have
hard.
a power meter because I just switched stuff in the new power meter batteries. When you ship them, sometimes the batteries go, go out.
How'd you do time-wise?
36:48.
Is that a PR for you?
Mm-hmm.
Nice job.
At 187 still?
Yeah, 189 probably.
Okay.
But
Nice job.
I actually kicked it up. You said you paced poorly.
Yeah.
I kicked it up much more than you.
Really?
At the end, yeah.
Yeah.
For our I looked at our VAM scores and our times relative. And
Yeah. I feel like we could, I feel like I want to go back and do it with better pacing.
you can cut this part out, but there's no sound live. Do you want to try fixing the sound and cutting that out, or do you want to just keep going?
No, we'll just keep going through. Yeah. So everything checks out due to our right now our producer's letting us know that everything's checking out. So we'll have to solve it in post. That's what redundancy is for. Okay, so Steve, let's go into Steve's question. He says, I've been a user on and off for a while, and the outdoor option will probably keep me over the summer. And he says, thank you for that. That's good. Good to hear. He says, if you need a beta tester for the Garmin Workout Connection, let me know. I had a couple of questions about CTL. I understand that it is a measure of fitness.
No.
Nice. Thanks for jumping in, Chad. But I've noticed it plateau and drop as I have started race season. Is that a symptom of not doing the regular training while in race recovery mode? And he's talking about I just race and recover, like what you do in race season. The other question is, will CTL increase just by increasing FTP and following the workouts over a training period, or do I need to add more training time at a certain point to get more fitness? I guess my questions are mostly around how CTL is a measure of fitness. What are the factors that increase it? So that's all sorted there. Let's go into, let's clarify things first.
So first off, Steve, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, listen to that because we talked about TSS and there's a more elaborate description or explanation of it that I'm going to offer right here. First off, CTL is a term that is used by Training Peaks and Andrew Coggin, and it's an exponentially weighted average every TSS over 6 weeks. We do something similar, but we just do a 6-week rolling average. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So ours isn't quite as scientific. If you really want to dig into the gory details of it,
I would say scientific, complex.
That's a better word. That's absolutely a better word.
Yeah.
Let me say the difference is with CTL, if you do a really hard workout right at the end of your 6 weeks, it'll be weighted more than if you did one 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that exponential weighting comes into play. So if you really want to dig into the gory details of that, it's pretty easy to find information on, or find the whole calculation, the equation. Mm-hmm. But again, repeat with me, CTL is not a measure of fitness. CTL is a measure of training load. How you respond to that training load dictates fitness.
So the question, like Dr. Coggin says that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I love the guys at Training Peaks. You go to their website and it says CTL, and in quotes it says fitness.
That's the problem. That's a problem, and that's why for many years I equated CTL with fitness and ATL, the acute load, with fatigue because that's how it was labeled. So I carried that with me for a long time, and it took me a while to get over that hurdle because it was just so deeply ingrained.
Yes.
To a little inside baseball here, Dr. Coggin, he's the one that came up with TSS, normalized power, CTL, ATL, TSB. He has a loose relationship with Training Peaks. Training Peaks then trademarked those terms that he came up with, and some people call them the Training Peaks metrics. But in my mind, Dr. Coggin created them. Yes,
they're his.
They're his, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but he doesn't have the trademark on them, so that's why there could be more confusion
not
too.
His. It's
I don't know how that works, but
sticky. So, like I said, we use CTL, TSS to help us analyze how we're responding to the training stress. So it's a measure of stress, how we respond to it, and in the analysis, that all plays in together. And an example, or I've said before, how the composition is another thing that has to be considered. If it's homogeneous, if it's the same thing, you can use CTL and just see it rise up and see when you start to break down, see how you're responding. Either way, it's a little more useful in that context. But if you change that composition, you get different results. You can have a 600 CTL, so you're on average doing 600 TSS per week. You can have that same CTL doing VO2 max work, doing aerobic endurance work, doing sweet spot work, but all those outcomes are going to be mildly to vastly different.
Yeah, I'd say vastly.
Depending on how which ends of the spectrum you're operating at, and then also consider the establishment of fitness. It can take you many weeks to ratchet your chronic load, your 6-week average up to 600, but then to keep that level of fitness that goes with that might only take a single touch-up workout done every 8 or 10 days. So again, if you're just looking at CTL, if you're just looking at TSS, you're missing some points.
So I'm going to say your point another way. Can you, especially as a new rider, you could do 300 TSS a week and get gains. Your fitness could increase, and you could do that for literally like 6 months because your workouts still, you're doing harder workouts and you're doing ramp tests and your FTP is going up and you're actually doing more work, but your CTL or your 6-week average is the same the whole time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to ramp.
Right.
But
Exactly.
fitness
right.
is rising.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big misunderstanding with that. Once again, it's the association that, or the assumption that it equals fitness, right?
Yeah. Which is, I'm sorry about that. It took a toll on me as well. For literally years.
It happens.
So what you need to be asking yourself is, when your CTL or your TSS starts to drop on a weekly basis, what's happening to your race performance? Because if your race performance is tanking, then maybe you look a little deeper into that, or all the other things that can possibly affect your performance. If, however, you're performing well, then maybe you're right on track. I mean, you're properly sharpening for your events. You're chasing those very specific capabilities, and everything's as it should be. CTL, TSS, be damned.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's, I see this a lot when people say, I had a great performance despite the fact that my CTL was not where I thought it was going to be. Or I had a really bad performance despite I thought it was exactly where it should be.
Yeah.
There's a decoupling there. It isn't a direct indicator of performance.
I also see it as like, I've seen before races, P1 2 field, guys, people are like, hey, what's your CTL at?
Yeah.
Like trying to gauge
totally,
each other
yeah.
and do that. And I think it's a confidence thing. And it's not, I mean, it's a great metric still.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Like
Totally.
you can use, just don't use
in
it
the right
for
context, hugely useful.
Yes, right. So it is good to, over time, to try to build that. And one other problem people do, I see all the time, and correct me if, or you guys, let me hear your opinions after I tell you my opinion.
Yeah.
People will try to either ramp it too quickly, do too much, because they think, oh, I need to get this. This is the result, right?
Yes.
This is a number that I have higher. But it's more like I feel like almost like a dance that you do with it, where you do 400 for a while, then you're like, ooh, let's see how my body works with 425 or 450, rather than like, I need to get to 800.
So we're just going to race up to 800?
Yeah.
The guys I race against have 800 CTLs. I need to be there too.
Yep.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, exactly right. Probably not, right?
Maybe not.
Especially if they're doing a lot of outdoor, like there's easy to rack
Tons
up
of
a
long
whole
rides.
Yep. Those weekend, you 2 5-hour weekend rides.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like
you can be huge.
Go do a training camp. We went to Kona and we came away with like 900 TSS weeks.
Yep.
If I tried to do that on a VO2 max work or microburst or something,
Right.
it would have destroyed me.
Like you said, since it's tied into TSS inherently, and like we've said many times on the podcast, not all TSS is created equal. It has implications through to CTL as well.
Yeah.
It's not just, that doesn't just stop with TSS.
Exactly. And then he asked, will CTL increase just by increasing FTP? It's all tied together. It's all relative. So you can have two different riders with vastly two different FTPs do the same workout and accrue the same TSS.
Yep.
That's a really good point though. So inside of your FTP, like you do your ramp test, it's not like you stay exactly that fit for your FTP for your 6 or 8 weeks of training.
Stay here.
You go in there, right? Like sometimes you go down, sometimes you're up, and you're like the top of your FTP, I feel like, and the bottom of your FTP, and you can do, as you get more fit, you can hold your threshold for longer, you could do more repeats, and as you get to the end of that, before you retest, you could do harder workouts, and maybe you could do a 140 TSS workout, where when you first started, you could do 115.
Yeah.
But then, when you raise your FTP, you now start back over at the 115.
Yeah.
So really, when you raise your FTP, you should expect a little drop in CTL. Where you might be also, this gets really fine. You probably don't need to worry about this stuff, but I think about this stuff a lot. I'm sure we all do. So you could be doing the same wattage workout at a higher FTP and getting less CTL from one day to the next day. Because a hard workout at the end of a plan, the new easy workout as your FTP goes up could be the exact same wattage. Right? Your threshold intervals are now sweet spot. One day has changed, yet your CTL is different.
Totally.
And then people live and breathe it so much that and then they get
little
confused.
Swings in fitness and freshness from day to day can impact this, and you just can't read too much into that.
Right.
Yep.
That's like, I feel like, and I know this is going to sound like a soft or a hard sell, however you wish, but I feel like that's why understanding all of this, it can get pretty complex. And I feel like that's why it's so useful to have like a properly structured plan in place rather than just like, I'm just raising my numbers up and we're just going to see where they go.
Anybody, if you want to get that granular, you're just going to frustrate yourself. It's like trying to manage your weight loss on a daily basis or weighing yourself a couple times a day.
That's great.
You need to look at bigger trends. You need to take a step back.
The other thing too, for comparatively, I see this all the time on TrainerRoad where people have their FTPs too low and they're doing like 1,000 TSS a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you're not. Because you're like inside of that, you're doing like an hour at threshold inside of your like long ride, and your FTP is obviously too low.
Yeah.
And even just moving your FTP a little bit greatly influences CTL.
Big changes.
Oh, yeah.
And TSS and then CTL.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Is there anything more that you want to cover on this one,
Yeah,
John?
a couple other questions. Do I need more training time at a certain point to get more fitness?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, that's very probably. But again, you can shift the composition of the training. So it might not just be more TSS, could be different TSS.
Right, absolutely.
I know
At some time, we're all going to hit a spot where we need more volume if you're consistent.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
There is some time where we're all going to hit a spot where we need more volume, but we can't handle it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
It's whether it's because our
No, those
bodies
are both
can
really good
absorb it, we
points.
don't have time to do it,
Yep.
whatever else it is.
Yeah, I mean, you can train on 300 TSS a week for a long time and see improvement, but eventually that 300 TSS, no matter how you compose it,
Yep.
is not going to yield improvement.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And a lot of the time you'll see, like with top athletes, it doesn't mean that they're going to be, if he did 1,000 TSS this year, he's going to get up to 1,500 or 2,000 the next year. There are kind of limits that the body can sustain. And in many cases, once again, this CTL or TSS as well, it's all accrued from different types of efforts. They may shift around the sort of training they do. And CTL isn't exactly what they're focused on. It's just more about changing the composition.
Not to
of
beat a
what they
dead
do.
horse, because I said this very thing last week, but if you rose to an 800 CTL last season,
not
yielded
800. Like, that'd be
sorry.
like 85 or something.
Or not
Yeah.
CTL, sorry,
Yeah.
800 TSS per week
Yeah.
last season, and you yielded great performance. But this season you're doing the same thing, but it's not. I mean, you have to. Again, there are just too many other factors that can impact that.
Yeah.
For instance, you have a child, you change jobs, you change locations, you moved, whatever,
Composition of the training.
and the
Quality
composition
of the training.
Yes, yeah.
100%.
Your level of recovery, your diet, maybe whatever. A lot of things can influence it.
His final question there, what are the factors that increase it? I think we just covered that pretty well. Really, we're talking about the
anything
factors that really how you train and how much you train. That's basically...
Yeah, and I think what
where
he's
you're at.
actually asking are what are the factors that increase fitness, and that's. I think we pretty much
Training.
covered that as well.
Yep, exactly
There's
right.
there's 200 podcasts.
Make very hard pedal. Yep, that's it.
It's out there.
Jeff, he says, I'm a master's track racer, age 64, FTP somewhere north of 230, a TrainerRoad user, a podcast listener, and a 5-star guy. I agree. He sounds like a 5-star guy. It's pretty good. He says, great job.
5-star guy to me, Jeff.
That's it, yeah.
By the way, I think that's amazing. Like 64
Right?
racing.
And track racing too, because I feel like track racing is much more, I don't know, I feel like it's higher consequence in a lot of ways, right? Like closer quarters, that sort of a thing.
I don't know what kind of track
Impressive.
racing, but that's actually a good. If you are solo on
Solo
track,
would be great.
that seems like a great way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good on you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I want to. I want to.
Yeah,
Sometimes you
it'd
don't
be
get to
sweet.
make that choice, though.
Right, exactly right. Yeah, it's 64. I hope to be as 5-star as you are, Jeff. Says, great job continuing to produce content week after week. We appreciate it, and thanks for listening. I feel like I'm pretty fit, but sometimes when I go from resting to walking, and he says not running, up a flight of stairs, I get to the top totally gassed. I mentioned this at the track the other day, and about 3 other very fit people have the same experience. It's odd, and I'm curious about the physiological reasons for this. Cheers, Jeff. I think all of us can relate to that. I'm sure
Everybody-
people listening to this are
everybody,
like,
fit or not.
that's me. That's everyone.
You'd be ultra fit and still have the same issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So
right.
let me explain a couple things that are at least related. One of the physiological phenomenon I want to cover is called orthostatic hypotension. And basically, it's just low blood pressure when changing from either recumbent or a seated position to a standing position. And we've all done this, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting on the couch, you pop up, you run into the kitchen, or whatever, and all of a sudden you get lightheaded, a little woozy. That's
Yep.
exactly what I'm describing here.
And this happens after a hard workout,
Yes.
or after a hard race.
And I'll explain why that
Yes.
is particularly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're seeing is a lack of blood vessel constriction in the lower body. When you lay down, there's just not a lot of muscle activity. Muscles aren't contracting. There's not circulation isn't at it's not the necessity it is when we're active.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get into the details of it, this orthostatic hypotension is basically when you see a 20 millimeter drop in your systolic pressure or 10 millimeter drop in your diastolic. So if you do happen to be measuring it, or if you happen to be sitting there and you just want to geek out on this stuff, put a cuff on and you can see my BP's this low. If I stand up fast, probably going to get a little dizzy. But it's all related to blood pressure. So, and one possible cause, and why I think relates so much to endurance athletes, especially after a long, hard ride, is that, or workout, run, whatever, is it a reduction in blood volume brings with it a reduction in blood pressure. And that's, I mean, when you think of lower plasma volume, you're just dehydrated. And pretty much any long taxing workout regardless of hot day, indoors, outdoors, whatever. You lose a lot of sweat and you don't
Totally.
replenish it, or even if you're in the process of replenishing it, your blood volume's low, your blood pressure's low, you're a little more subject to the effects of this form of hypotension. Mm-hmm. And then we also have, as athletes, very commonly low resting heart rates, which also means, low blood pressure potentially.
Yeah. Good in many ways, but this is one of the effects.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, and as I mentioned, it can cause lightheadedness, even fainting, because we're just getting low blood flow to the brain.
Yeah.
And I have a particular instance that might be fun to relate.
I was just going to ask if you guys have
when I was
fainted
younger, my girlfriend at the time, I had slipped around the corner of the house, popped off the couch, just like I described, heading into the kitchen. She comes around the corner and asks me, "What are you doing?" Because for the last few seconds, all she heard was thud, thud, thud. And it was me bent over, leaning against the wall, apparently passing out into the wall, reviving, passing out into the wall. I was literally banging my head on the wall.
Wow. That explains a lot, huh?
It really
That's
drove that
crazy.
home. So,
Wow.
I looked into, at the time, I didn't really have the resources I do now. So I
You really wanted to faint.
real bad.
He kept trying for it.
I just picture himself waking himself up from the pain. Oh, I'm awake. Oh, never mind,
Not
I'm
like
asleep.
fully waking up, just enough to repeat.
Have you ever fainted, Nate?
Nope.
I never have either. Yeah. I got super scared because when I was a kid in elementary school, I saw a kid faint in the bathroom. He bent down to pick something up, fainted, and hit his head on the sink. It was a bloody scene. It was pretty scary.
Yeah, heads bleed like stuck pigs.
Ugh, yeah. I never want to do that.
Okay, so related to this, is there something called the muscle pump? And I'm not talking the pump you get in the gym. I'm talking about the skeletal muscle pump.
People can check out Arnold's video for that one. It's very funny.
So in our peripheral veins, the venous system, the atrial system, whatever,
Atrial.
Versus the venous system, blood away from the heart, blood back to the heart. The valves in these, so in our periphery, in our arms and legs, are one-way valves. So they let blood go through, but they don't let blood backwash, basically. And this is it's termed unidirectional blood flow, and it assists this venous return. It gets blood through the body and back to the heart to be reoxygenated and resupplied with whatever, so that it can be pumped out to the working muscles. So when we have low activity, like I said, there's not a lot of muscle activity taking place. So the blood does pool in our legs. There's nothing pushing it through. And not in terms of the low blood pressure, the low heart rate. There's just not enough force to really keep it moving. You're seated in a chair. It just sits there, right? To some extent. So we do have something that can affect this positively. I mean, we can affect it with the muscle pump. So by contracting the muscles create pressure on the walls of the veins, and they actually assist the blood flow.
Yep.
So it's a muscle pump.
Yeah.
And this is one of the rationales behind the active recovery between intervals. Rather than sit there and let that muscle, to some extent, to some degree, let that blood pool in our inactive muscles. We keep our legs turning to assist the muscle pump, to assist circulation. And this is one of the rationales behind standing desks.
Yep.
Because even when you're standing, just the little shifts you make as you adjust your balance, the micro shifts that you don't even notice, that's muscle contraction. That assists the blood, the arterial pump as well, or the venous pump as well.
And the inverse of this is why when we get off an airplane, we have cankles.
Yeah,
swollen
exactly.
Lower limbs, everything else like that.
Because you're just sitting there letting the blood well up. And for that very reason, I've experimented with just, if you're not the type to get up and go to the bathroom frequently, so you're just seated there the whole time, you can flex your muscles. You can, activate
something.
your calves, your hamstrings, your quads, try to assist that muscle pump.
Or you can wear compression socks and shorts on a plane, right? Nate?
Seriously. I mean, that's one of the rationales behind those.
Yeah. I do this. I always
Jonathan,
recommend-
when we go to Kona, Jonathan wears compression socks, but always shorts with them.
Oh,
And
he's a very
everyone thinks
particular
he's an
look.
athlete.
I'm not a...
And everyone on the way back, you are an athlete, but you're not an Ironman athlete.
Yeah.
And the way back, too, everyone says, how was your race?
I mean, to be clear, I'm not bothered by it. So. But no,
Clearly.
it's
But I'm about to fly international. And you know what I'm doing?
like compression socks, right?
No, guys.
What?
This is me. I got to
Are you
take
going
it
to
to
bring
the...
Normatex or something?
Maybe.
Yeah.
On the plane?
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a
if
little
you're
lay
in first
flat
class,
thing.
then you're set.
Yeah.
You'll be
well,
in first
that's
It'd be
class.
kind of fun
That's
to do
different.
it. And I
That
think
would
I'm
be
going to
nice.
try to
Just
train
do
there
it in
too.
coach.
So might as well bring them on Ontario.
Jumper.
Coach. Excuse me, everybody. I just put them out in the
Can I just lay
the aisle.
these across you?
I don't know. I might, maybe not, but it's, yeah.
That's a good idea, though. So I always wear compression socks on the plane. I usually just wear pants, but when I go to Kona, I feel like I can wear shorts, and then I get confused as a really good athlete,
Yeah.
which is fun.
Okay. All right, we've derailed.
But no, one thing on this, though, I guess is that the same principle, because I'm sure that people will ask this in the forum, trying to anticipate this. That is the same principle. The rationale there is the same one for things like compression legs, like those the ones you put on,
to create a little bit of vasoconstriction, which ups the blood pressure, which enhances the blood flow.
Right. Got it.
Is
Cool.
the theory, right? Does
Perfect.
it work? I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. It feels good.
So related to this also, there's something called a respiratory pump. And very simply, that's just tied to your rate and depth of breathing. And this too can enhance the venous return. Both of these things aren't really taking place while you're crapped out on a couch or seated in a chair for a long period of time. So when you go from basically a resting state to a very active state, and climbing stairs is weight-bearing muscle activity, you're just playing catch-up. I mean, those muscles need oxygen. And if you bolt up the stairs and make it an entirely or predominantly anaerobic affair, you still have byproducts that have to be processed aerobically, which require oxygen. So you get to the top of the stairs and you're gassed.
Yep. Yeah, that happens.
Okay, Chad, I have another explanation.
Okay.
Because I can be
Otherwise.
otherwise. I can be walking around, go upstairs. I could sub 9 at Leadville.
Yeah.
And 2 flights of stairs. No, I don't have to be sitting down on all this stuff, and I'm like gassed.
Same
right?
thing though. You're going from a low activity, a low level of activity, to a high level of activity.
Okay, I can do anything and go upstairs and be gassed. And how I think it is, like relative to my fitness, it shouldn't be the same level. And I think we've probably all experienced
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
And why I think there is something on this is it's just cycling specific fitness versus other fitness.
Got it, yeah.
You start running, you start swimming, and you're like gassed. But if I do Stairmaster or whatever for
Maybe
2
a less
weeks,
efficient movement.
yep,
I see what you're saying.
I'll be right up there.
Yeah.
Like right away. It just you see it all the time when runners go to cycling, they can't do anything,
Usually
right?
inefficient.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'd
very
still-
fit,
But then
not
they get
in
to
that
it very
realm.
quickly.
I see where you're going, yeah.
If you were extra fit at climbing stairs, you'd still experience the same things we were talking about when going from an inactive state to an active state. But if you were more
Active
fit,
to active.
yeah,
Active to slightly more active.
Active to active.
Inactive to just
Yeah,
active.
Exactly
I mean,
right.
you develop that. It's a different strain on your muscles,
Sure.
and you do it for a while, and you'll be fine. So you're still fit, Jeff.
Yeah,
Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
no, this is no reflection on your fitness.
yeah.
Happens to like everyone, though, right?
Oh yeah,
every
everybody,
cyclist.
everybody.
Every
How
person.
is that?
Yeah, it always happens.
But you walk with someone who isn't a cyclist and fit at all, and you drop them on the stairs.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's always about dropping the other guy.
We're everyone's best friend there. Megan says, can you discuss the best position of the back when riding? And we're talking about the human back. I noticed in pictures that my back is a bit more rounded when riding compared to a lot of other women in the pack. However, this past weekend at Golden State, that's a race in Northern California here. Hope you did well, by the way, Megan. She says, even when, she says, I noticed that Nate Pearson's back was a bit more rounded than flat, even when he got more aero. Is this because we are tall, or is it a bike fit issue? I do notice in the pro peloton that some guys have backs that are more rounded, whereas others are more flat, and there doesn't seem to be a clear reason why. I've tried playing around with my position both on the trainer and on the road. It seems that the more flat I try to make my back, the sharper the hip angle, the more power I give up. Indeed, this is even mentioned in a couple of the TrainerRoad workouts in the workout text. It mentions the hip angle, and the tighter it is, the less blood flow there is. And if you round out your back a little, it provides more space to breathe to help with optimal power when pedaling. So, is there a right way to hold your back when you're riding? And if so, how do you achieve it without giving up power?
Yeah, I don't think there's a right way. I think this is just two divergent schools of thought.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of support for each of them. Then there are limitations, pros and cons to each of them as well. Bike fit absolutely plays a part, though. I mean, if your bike's
Totally.
too small for you, you're going to be curled up in a little ball. You're going to have to round your spine. That, or you're going to be, you're going to have to get an exceptionally long stem. It's going to affect the handling of the bike. But suffice it to say, bike fit does play a part. So make sure your frame is sized appropriately. And then the position of the saddle is simple. You can find a bike that's perfectly sized for you, but you push that saddle forward, you're going to have to round your back. You push that saddle back, all other things
have
being
to
the same.
sharpen up
You
your
push it
angle.
back, you're going to have to sharpen that saddle angle, or that hip angle, by flattening out your back.
Yeah, like we were watching the Tour of California is going on right now, and we were watching
perfect
Ben King
demonstration of
and
it.
Simon Geschke in the breakaway on stage 3. So you can check that out. You can look it up on like highlights or anything else, and you'll see this. Ben King looks like he just has like a perfectly flat back and really sharp hip angle.
Very flat back rider.
Yep, and then Simon Geschke has a more rounded back. And it was funny, before I had read this question, I had bookmarked it, and when I saw that, I was like, this is exactly like the visualization
It is, and
of
they're both reasonably, they got to be within an inch or two of each other in height, right?
Yep.
Pretty similarly sized. So it's
Yeah.
not like one's tall and he has to round his spine and the other's short and he does it with a sharper hip angle.
It's just different fits and different ways that they are used to carrying
And it's
body.
not to say one's better than the other, but you could experiment with the two of them and have them try each and see over a period of acclimation. I mean, it would take some time.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe Ben King with that sharp hip angle is doing himself a disservice and could actually eke more power out of it by rounding his spine. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you're going to touch into blood flow for a second, and I don't know if this kind of hits on it.
Just because I wanted to explain why that's in the workout text in one of those workouts out there somewhere.
On the experimentation side of things, during the hill climb TT that we just did, there's a section on that climb where it actually goes downhill for a bit and then flat, and then it starts climbing again. It's toward the end of it. I was pretty loaded up at that point in terms of, I was feeling pretty exhausted. But when I went through that section, knew that I was going to have a crosswind, and I really didn't want to bleed speed. So my hip angle was much sharper through there. I tried to get a lot flatter, a lot lower, that sort of a thing, rather than being more postured up and climbing. And I think it personally, because I don't ride with a really sharp hip angle like that, it did me a disservice, because after that, I felt like it was much harder to put out power. I felt like I had to work harder to do that. And then I don't know if I felt the effects of the change in blood flow, something like that, but it really did feel like it took me a while to get out from underneath that position change while holding the same power.
Yeah, my stance is that I'm very much of the rounded back school of thought in terms of creating the most power, and even if it comes slightly at the expense of aerodynamics.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. That's my take on it. The workout text that talks about the limit of blood flow it was a 2009 study done by LIM, L-A-M, that is titled Iliac Artery Compression in Cyclists, Mechanics, Diagnosis, and Treatment. So we're talking about the effects that an aerodynamic position or that folded position have on, in particular, your iliac artery. And in it talks specifically about riding aero. It talks about a number of things that can impact the health of the iliac artery. But in one of the sections, it was all about riding aerodynamically and the hip hyperflexion that comes into place with that. So if you think of flexing the hip, you basically bring your knee up towards your pelvis. You're flexing the hip. But hyperflexion is where we take it to that more extreme extent of the range of motion. And we do that many, many times. In the case of a Grand Tour rider, all the training and the racing, we're talking like 8 million-ish times per year. Yeah. So it's a lot of repetitions. And over the course of those repetitions, we're bending and stretching the external iliac artery. And it can have effects. It can damage the arterial wall. It can limit blood flow in the moment. I mean, there's a lot of downsides to it. Whether or not that's happening all the time, whether or not it's a concern for most of us, I can't say. But it is something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, how about you? Where do you sit on this?
Okay. I've got there are a few things I want to say on this. One is, Chad, you're absolutely right. Like if you can't put your saddle very far forward, you're going to be either closed off or you have to round your lower back. Yeah. It's kind of more straight up. And actually your upper back gets rounded more to make up for it.
Yeah, it's true. You see that. Yeah, it rounds higher up.
Yeah, it's not a good looking posture. It doesn't look powerful, doesn't look comfortable.
It doesn't, does it? But I would argue that it's probably... So it's me and Lance Armstrong, like famously have this upper back.
Yeah.
Famously, yes, famously.
Ian,
fused vertebrae.
And my vertebrae is all messed up too. Yeah. In the forum, let's do pictures of these examples of different types of riders.
Absolutely.
And I have some pictures of myself too. But so for me, and I think this happens for a lot of tall people.
And desk jockeys. But tall desk jockeys especially.
It's years of hunching over. And I have an incredibly flexible upper back. And I've done it so much
couldn't hear that he was leaning forward.
If you have, hopefully they couldn't hear it. Like if you look at an X-ray of me, I really can do it, and it's hard for me to stand up perfectly straight. And you see this. Sorry, tall people, because other people are going to not be able to unsee this. Like tall women and tall guys, a lot of times they have that kind of hunch in their back. We just feel so.
Is it because you're always having to bend over to things that we don't?
I think so. Not dunk it, like talk to people and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It just feels weird to be like.
Even your microphone is taller than our microphone, right? And you still have to hunch.
I'm hunching, right?
Yeah.
Everything's made for you guys.
Yes.
So one part of it is your drop, for your hip angle and your drop, if you don't have your if your back tries to fold over too much and remain flat, because your legs are so long, your knees, like my knees already hit my chest when I'm in a TT position, that if I were to do a flat back, I would be like pushing myself up and slamming against my chest.
Causing all sorts of issues.
No room to breathe.
And
it probably heads the list.
And you can do shorter cranks, but still it's not short enough. Yeah. So what it kind of have is it's like a rounded hump, and then you have a sharp angle down on the back of your neck. And I think what that does is it gives you a little space for your aero helmet to fit in. And you kind of work on that. And I was more aero than lots of tall people.
Yeah.
And I think that helps is that you can fill that space in. And if you have that, try to get an aero helmet that I think I don't really know for sure, but to fill in that space.
That's
makes
a fine
sense.
point, though. But if you're a rounded back rider versus a flat back rider, there are helmets specific to those types of riders. I mean, this helmet is better for a flat back rider. This helmet is better for a rounded back rider.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So the downside of this is that when your upper back has such a sharp round, that in order to look forward, you have to do this really tight turn to look back, and your neck then is
under a lot of stress.
Yeah, you're bending your neck maybe twice the rate of a normal person. And people go, I don't understand why you complain about your neck. They have flat backs, usually shorter. They can put their seat forward a little bit, and they're not hitting their chest. And then they have like a flat back, and your neck's really not bent very much at all. And then look at someone like me or Lance, either one.
It's really just one of the same.
Yeah. And there's this. It's like a acute angle, right?
Yeah.
So that can hurt. So I think in general for a tall person that you do this, I think aerodynamically and power, you're going faster. But if you're doing an Ironman or something like that, even a 40K TT, it's so much strain in your neck that if it causes you to get out, then you're going to be slower, and you got to get this more.
Well, you have to get your eye line up. So at some point in the spinal chain, if you will, you've got to make up for it.
Yeah, that's why it hurts.
Yeah,
to be able to see.
Unfortunate.
So
everybody's unique. I'm not sure that there truly is like a one way that's better than the other. However, if you think physiologically, just allowing yourself a little bit more room, that sort of a thing.
Yeah. I just think with the more extreme your position is going to be, the more aerodynamic you're trying to be, you're going to have to round your back. You can only get so flat and still be able to pedal without knocking yourself in the chest. And still
with bike fit regulations as they are.
Well, yeah, in triathlon though, if you're a shorter rider and you can push that seat forward, you can get a really flat back in a great position. And I think flat backs look cool.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because they can push everything so forward in terms of the extensions and the bars and the pads and everything else.
That's a really good point too, because I might say that I lean more towards the flat back school of thought in triathlon and multisport.
Yes.
Yeah, especially for your neck.
Yep.
So what Dan Anfield told us, and I've experienced this, you get the saddle so far forward that you actually feel like you're pedaling backwards.
Yeah, you feel like you're pressing in a portion of the pedal stroke. You feel like you're kind of pressing back because you can put yourself so far forward like that.
And his idea is whatever your road position is, you're doing the same position, you're just rotating everything forward. So your hip angle is still going to be open, but you can be aerodynamic.
Keeping in mind when you rotate forward that your bottom bracket doesn't move, everything else
everything else has to move.
But it only can in triathlon, uniquely can in triathlon because of the lack of regulation that they have compared to what we have with USA Cycling or UCI or anything else like that. So yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed too at periods of time, take this for a grain of salt, but even when I look at pictures, when I have a lack of hip mobility and everything else, I actually end up not rounding my back as much. When I look at pictures and I had knee problems, I was folded much more at the waist. When I look at pictures now this year compared to like 2015 when I didn't have any knee problems, that sort of a thing, I have a more rounded back, lower back, I should say. So I don't know if that's any sort of correlation or causation, whatever it is, but that just happens to be what I've seen. So, and I know that when I sharpen things up on that hip angle, my performance goes down. Maybe I just don't train it enough. Matt says, hey guys, big thanks from the UK. I love the podcast and the app. I've been using it properly this year to do some structured training with my low student budget and limited free time, and I love it. My question is, how do I put on weight in a controlled way so making sure it becomes functional and not fat? This is the opposite of what most people are always talking about, is he wants to put on weight, right? And the reason he says this, he says, my FTP is 325 and I weigh 67 kilograms, which is about 147 pounds. So that puts him at about 4.85 watts per kilogram.
Puts him way up there.
So he is really fast.
Yeah.
That's
so we're
basic.
Already pushing up toward the high end of things.
That's me.
Which is going to influence the recommendations to come.
That's me plus like 10 watts, 10, 15 watts. That's really, really good. Like I would be happy to be there. So he's fast. He says, or thereabouts, no scale. And so he says that's roughly where he's been weighing. He does mention the fact that he doesn't have a scale at the university, a personal scale. So
we're guessing.
Yep, so we're guessing. But the racing around here where I live is always super punchy. So flat roads with a sprinkling of steep power climbs. And he says power climbs, those are the sort of climbs that are short, enough that, a big rider can get through them relatively well. So the weight doesn't tend to affect them quite as much. There are also just a ton of flat crits as well. I wouldn't know how to categorize myself as a rider, and I'm only getting back into racing after a little, he says, exam-induced, forgive me. Exam-induced hiatus last year. He says, but I seem to be getting smoked on the flats and even more on even on most climbs, which are usually pretty short, with 15 minutes being at the extreme end. By my mates whose FTPs are similar, if not a bit higher, but weigh in at 75 to 80 kilograms, so 165 to 175 pounds. He says, I can't help but think of all the watts I'd have if I kept my fairly respectable FTP but weighed 8 kilos more. So I think that he's perhaps has that twisted.
I think he's looking
by
at
watt to kg.
I think watt to kg is what he's really getting at, yeah. He says, I've sort of neglected going to the gym this winter as I only have limited time to train because of my degree, and now it's coming into the race season. I surely can't be in the gym that much or that fatigue will carry on to the bike, right? So my diet at the moment is pretty deficient of meat. I also eat a lot of vegetables, fish, and sometimes a bit of chicken on a student budget. So any racing tips for someone who's a bit smaller would be greatly appreciated. Thanks in advance. Again, love the podcast. So a lot to unpack from this one.
Yeah.
But in short, he's a rider who, if your estimation is right on weight, which that may be the first problem, maybe you weigh more than you think, but if your estimation is right on weight, you have a really good you have a favorable watt kg, but you're relatively light and you're struggling in sections where bigger riders do well, like flats, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I wouldn't look so much at FTP as a marker for why you're getting beat up by your mates who have similar FTPs. It's clear to me that they've got something else going on.
Can I just adding into that? I mean, 325 is pretty high.
Yeah. So I don't think FTP,
really high.
I don't think FTP is limiting right now.
Like even
Strength
if you're
to weight's not limiting it right now.
Yeah, like if you're in crosswind sections, that sort of stuff, 325 is still a pretty high amount of power that will get you by with big riders. That's a big FTP.
And they can all have the same FTP, exactly the same FTP. They could even be the same body weight, but it sounds like they're heavier. But they can put out more anaerobic power. So it's a different thing. And unfortunately, that anaerobic power doesn't anchor to FTP all that cleanly. We've talked about this a number of times.
Sure.
So same FTPs, but much greater anaerobic work capacity.
Sure.
So that's where I'm going with this. That's what you probably need to address. I don't think you need to bring your FTP up. I think you need to address the anaerobic side of things. Not to say that FTP doesn't include some of that. So one question is, will an increased FTP bring anaerobic improvements? It could, but like I just said, in your case, probably not. You're already way up there. Improved anaerobic work capacity, however, which, by the way, is measured in kilojoules. So if you've never really looked at what your anaerobic capacity is or never measured it, most head units will display your kilojoules, do an anaerobic effort, an all-out 30, an all-out minute, all-out 90, whatever, and you can see how many kilojoules you can expend before you completely run out of gas. And then you have a measure of your anaerobic work capacity, and you got a metric to work with. Maybe it's 18, and you want to raise it to what your friends have, which is closer to 25, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But the point is, your mates, as you put it, have more anaerobic work capacity than you do. It really sounds as simple as that.
Could be. Yeah, that's one theory.
Could be, yep. And then as a side note, it's kind of along the lines of reverse periodization, where you ask if a larger anaerobic work capacity can elevate FTP. And it's a little contentious, but one of the ideas is that if I have more fiber recruitment in that I have an increased maximum power, so maybe you use 1 minute power to define this. And one rider has a 750 watt maximum power, the other rider has a 500 watt maximum power, 1 minute power. If you're noodling along for a 6-hour road race, 5-hour stage, whatever, and you're both working at 250 watts, the 750 watt guy is only working at 33% of his capacity, while the 500 watt guy is working at 50%. So it's going to take a toll on the endurance. This is one theory. Right. Another theory is simply that more active muscle yields greater endurance. So if you have more muscle mass, you have more muscle fibers to cycle in and out of the mix. And I equate this to kind of soldiers on the field of battle, where you have a general commanding them, which is your CNS, your brain, your central nervous system. And then you have muscle fibers, which are the soldiers on the field. So if the brain or the general can send soldiers into battle, they fight and fight till they fatigue, they come back, you send in a fresh platoon, they come back, you keep cycling in. The bigger your army is, the more muscle mass you have, the more fresh platoons you can continue to send in. But then by the time you get all the way back to the beginning, the guys you send in first are fully revived. They can go in again. You keep that cycle flowing. So more muscle mass yields greater endurance. That's another theory.
Yeah.
Problem is that max power or your anaerobic work capacity isn't really a reliable anchor for sub-max activity. So you can have huge 1 minute power, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a good FTP.
Right. Absolutely. So I guess getting into what could be working with, or I guess with the different theories that this guy could have, being similar, at least to this person's profile in this case, I used to suck, like heavily suck at at flat efforts.
Sure.
I could not put out power in
if you don't
flats.
train it, unless you have some muscle fiber preponderance, which you probably would have discovered already, and you would train it because you'd realize I'm good at this, so I want to exploit that.
Yep.
It's not going to be there.
Yeah, because I absolutely when I would get into situations where I was on a climb, I was like, sure, I can hold whatever power I need. Then I would get into a flat, like whenever we would do TTs, I would do terribly, right? And I don't know if that's just an inertia thing. I mean, we've talked about that plenty of times.
I think that could be part of it, but I also think that we fall into, as aerobic athletes, endurance athletes, we fall into the rut of thinking that anaerobic power doesn't matter. Right. When in fact, anaerobic power is a large component of FTP first off, and it's what makes races for the large part. Really for any part, even a time trial, there's a big anaerobic component to going all out for close to an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do have to fuel for it though. I mean, if you're going to burn a lot of anaerobic energy, you got to put a lot of carbohydrate in the system. So there's some give and take there. And then of course there's how you're built as an athlete with the preponderance of muscle fibers. Are you more slow twitch or are you more fast twitch? And even there it gets a little more complex because you can have a sprinter who's largely a slow twitch athlete who's still a very good sprinter. Oh, yeah. And a climber who's largely a fast twitch athlete who's still a very good climber. Yeah. So again, it's not neat and clean, but there is a huge utility that comes with being anaerobically powerful, having a big anaerobic work capacity.
Yeah, I see this same thing like with lately in a lot of the mountain bike races we've been doing. We've been starting with juniors, and you can even see it in road races. A lot of the time it happens as well. But we start with these juniors, and they are so fast on climbs. And it's not just the first climb. It's throughout the whole race. They have really good power to weight ratios. And they even have, and some of them weigh the same as me, right in that region. But they just are really, really good at going up. But then you get onto flats, and they just can't.
Those guys, yeah.
They just drop straight back. And I think that there's, I don't know if it's a psychological thing in the sense that you are forced to ride at that higher power. So thusly you do that. And then it really takes a lot of focus and proactive work to kind of hit that power when you're on the flats. Perhaps that's something that hasn't developed. But I could see that there because to me, like if you're at 4.8 watts per kilogram, but you have a 325 watt threshold, pretty darn high, it just seems weird that you can't hang in the flats, right? It seems a little weird.
It doesn't. So now how do you go about improving this anaerobic work capacity or perhaps adding muscle mass? So you talked about your diet being deficient in meat. I don't know that it's necessarily deficient in protein because you said you have seafood and there's something else in there.
Chicken. Yep.
Chicken. Yeah. So that may not be a concern if you do, or if you are looking to add lean muscle mass and you're going to play that game and see if more mass actually yields more FTP, yields more anaerobic work capacity. Okay. Maybe you're going to want to increase your protein intake. That probably will require some weightlifting though, some time in the gym. But then you have to butt that up against the beneficial mass considerations. How much mass actually yields more power? How much of all of that or those two things together yield better performance?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So, because for the record, I mean, and all of us have seen this, there are a lot of very skinny riders out there who have quite a punch.
Oh, yeah.
They have very little muscle mass, very skinny, but man, do they have good 20 second, 30 second, 1 minute, 90 second power.
It's also easier to accelerate less weight.
Mass.
It takes less power to accelerate less mass. So
exactly.
Just in sprinting all the time, a small rider can put out a lot of power quickly, but they go faster than a bigger rider who puts out more power.
Exactly. Yeah, look at little riders like Michael Kwiatkowski, right? I mean, he's like a really tiny guy, really punchy.
And so we know that as an endurance athlete, there's a huge metabolic side to it. Conditioning is hugely important. It's impossibly important. But there's also the neuromuscular or the anaerobic focus that I think perhaps you're neglecting. So by training these two systems, you're going to get a couple of responses. One is that you're going to teach the muscle fibers to not only fire quickly, but you're going to recruit a lot of them in that particular action right then and there. So a lot of muscle fibers fire at the same time, and they fire very powerfully. So this is something that I don't think has been addressed. And when you do address it, though, make it specific to what you need it to be. I mean, you can go out and do microburst workouts, and that's super good if you're a criterium racer and you need to muster 15 seconds of power, and then you're going to get to lay off the gas for a minute. But if you're a guy who, we talk about these punchy climbs, has to go full gas for 90 seconds, recover for a couple minutes, and then do it again, train accordingly.
Yeah. I can't help but think aerodynamics could play into this too. I don't know. Maybe he's a sail. It could be, right?
A small factor.
I have a whole nother line on this. But everything you said was great information. Matt, something's wrong here. Because if you have a 25 watt FTP, there is no reason you should ever get dropped in the flats. Like if you're not attacking,
Unless you're riding with like pro tour guys or something.
nope. Tour de France on a flat stage, Matt can totally hang.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, 5 watts
sure.
kilogram,
Yeah,
really.
but what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
if there's 3 pro guys,
theoretically he can be dropped.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
don't say that
he's riding with Matthew Vanderpool, 6 of them.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And they all attack at once.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
but
exactly.
But so what happens when you're I think it's harder to get dropped with faster people, because if they're at the same FTP as you and they are pushing into the wind, they have to put out more energy exponentially the faster they go relative to you because you're in their draft.
Yeah.
Jose, we've talked about him a few times, a local rider.
Yeah. Small sprinter, very strong.
He's 145, his FTP is 250.
Yeah.
And he can ride P12 fields and not get dropped with people stronger, like on flat stages.
So I can't help but think that at 325, if that's the case, then,
Yeah. And so he can ride with me. I'm at 340 watts, and he just stays in my draft, and he's doing like not much. So I would look at, one, how are you measuring it? If you're using virtual power, like because you're in college, I don't know if you have a power meter, but look at that power meter. It's doubtful that your friends are underestimating their FTP because like nobody does that. But Matt, you might be overestimating it. And especially you say on the climbs, you're 4.8 watts per kilo and you're getting dropped on like 15-minute climbs.
Yeah.
You must have the fastest friends because 4.8, like normally in most areas.
It's rare you get dropped.
Yeah, or at least you're in contact, right?
Yeah.
I didn't get dropped from anything when I was at 4.8.
Yeah, and you're big, right? So
Yeah.
like, and when you get into that 5 watts per kilo, you're looking at like lower level pros or national champs. So if all your friends are that's insane. Okay, so there's that. Let's pretend like everything is right. You are not drafting correctly, right? Something is seriously wrong. So
you have a size XL jersey.
Your clothing, your helmet.
Yep.
Maybe you're riding gator skins with slime tubes in them, right? And you have a chain. You're in college. That is 15 years. Chad did that in Hawaii.
Yeah, he did. It was.
You have a really old chain that's never been cleaned. And you don't lube it, and all your bearings are bad. I don't know. Like
you're riding with your brakes on.
Your brakes are.
Your brakes on.
But so when you're drafting too, you have to feel the draft.
Yeah.
So not. Some people think, I just got to be behind this person. Well, if there's any kind of wind, that could be the worst position.
Yeah.
You might have to be beside them or kind of offset. So you really want to feel the draft.
You have to be closer than you think too. Wherever that is in relation to whether it's directly behind or the side, anything else, you have to. Closer you are, the easier it is.
Matt, you should message us because I want to know why.
Yeah,
where do you live?
Something's not adding up
that
here.
4.8 watts per kilo gets you dropped in the flats at 325.
Belgium.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He should be able to ride with 400 watt
Kind of
FTP riders on the
surface
flats and be fine.
Yeah.
Unless they're just, I don't know, multiple attacks and he's
Just
covering
hitting him,
every
hitting him,
attack.
hitting him.
Yeah. So, two, what I would do, what Chad talked about, to work on that anaerobic power is do Spanish needle. And Spanish needle is a very hard workout that we have, and I think it's 15-second efforts, but it's a lot of them back to back.
15 off.
Microbursts.
And everyone, if you can't do it right away, don't feel bad. I would just maybe insert it once a week and something else with your plan if this is a weakness of yours, and keep doing it until you can finish Spanish needle without any back pedals, not skipping any intervals, or taking extra rest between sets.
That's a good one for work capacity because you have to punch again and again and again and again.
Yep.
It's a good one for your aerobic capacity because there's very little downtime. You don't get fully recovered. And it's really good for rate of recruitment because you have to go from 50% up to 150%, back down to 50 and repeat, back up to 150. So you have to muster your power really, really quickly.
And I think it's good mentally because you think in a race this happens and you're like, I can't go again. But then you think, you know what? I did Spanish needle and I can actually do this for 20 minutes or however long it is.
It's a big psychological help. It really is. And you kind of, if like you said, Nate, it may be hard at first, but as you do more of this work, you'll get better at it. And you'll surprise yourself a lot of the times because you'll go in and you'll feel like, man, I really don't know if I can do more. But you put your head down and you get the work done. You're like, I did it.
And you start to recognize how just a little dab of recovery can actually get you to and through another effort.
Yeah, so it makes you ride.
And again.
It makes you value and seek for those efficient grabs when you're out on the road, riding, and you're in a race scenario, you really start to hunt for those 15-second recoveries. So
it's really encouraging to see that all I need is 5 seconds and I can go again, or 10 seconds, I can go again.
And to that point, Matt, like especially if you just upped your FTP and you're not a good anaerobic person, how Matt might be, it can be hard to get through it the first time, and you might need to backpedal or skip one of the intervals.
Sure.
But really, you skip one of those, and you get so recharged. That extra 15 seconds.
Yeah, you take a 15-second recovery value and grow it to 45. So you do a couple of those in the longer sets, and you can get through that whole set with minimal misses.
Which is perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, you're still getting a ton of time at 150% of FTP.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of those where Pete, he might not be able to do some VO2 max workouts or even threshold workouts. Like, they're harder for him.
Yeah, I'm that way also.
But Spanish Needle, which is one of the hardest anaerobic workouts we have, he can do that instantly because he is very anaerobic. But he knows that, so then he just works in his threshold and VO2 max to improve his weakness, because it
Totally.
you can't just be anaerobic. At least some races you can, but not all races.
And the beauty of this format too is because it's so intermittent. You work really hard, but then you rest. You don't really well up in terms of lactate. Your breathing only gets so high. Your heart rate only gets so high. And all those things will increase over the course of the set, but they don't start sky high and stay there like they do if you try to do a solid 2 or 3 minute VO2 max effort.
Right, exactly. Max's question. He says, I love the podcast, listen to it every day, and love the app. 5 stars and then some. Thank you. You can leave those ratings on iTunes or whatever other format you use to listen to the podcast. He says, I saw an increase from 294 to 303 to 311 watts, forgive me, over the winter. Nice. I'm currently sitting at 4 watts per kilogram training at 9,600 feet in Breckenridge. Nice job. Way to go. There's some hard workouts up at 9,600 feet.
Yeah, man, you drop down to sea level. You're going to be a rocket.
Yeah, that means he's much higher than 4 watts per kilo. Maybe
exactly right.
4.5.
Yep. Yeah. With that much. Really good. He says, this question is for Nate in particular.
Hey.
He says, Nate, you don't know this, but you and I are similar builds and eaters. I'm 6'4", 175 pounds, and I can eat more food than you would want to shake a stick at. I'm a huge fan of the carbo load, and my question to you is, have you ever tried beans?
I have.
He says, I usually do my workout.
Yes.
He says, I usually do my workouts after work, and I'm usually eating all day, and every time I have a healthy helping of beans, pinto in particular, I found are great. I have an outstanding ability to put out power for long periods of time. This is not a one-time occurrence either. I've made note of my stellar performances on numerous occasions now in connection with consuming beans. I'm 100% convinced that beans are a performance-enhancing food and would love to get your guys' opinion on it. This is a question as much as a suggestion. So Nate, Chad, Jonathan, please eat a can of pinto beans before a workout and tell us if you experience the same thing. Thanks, guys.
They are.
They're
on the endurance diet too.
They're a great food.
Yeah.
They are.
So let me give you just some of the cons, or the purported cons of beans. And there's a lot of types of beans, but most beans are high in lectins. And lectins are basically, they affect your gut health. They cling to the lining of the gut, the villi. They can have bad effects, but the poison's in the dose. So you can't just say beans have lectins, lectins cause problems, beans cause problems. It's not how it works, especially if you cook them. If you cook them, most of those lectins are long gone, and it's reduced to a dose that probably doesn't affect you. So cook your beans. Done.
Yeah.
Don't eat raw beans.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't.
Which
is why when people mention that beans are high in lectins, it's like, well, yeah, if they're raw, but who eats raw beans?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure too when you get canned beans, like you get 0 lectins.
Very probably.
You can Google that, but I remember I looked at that before because I saw the same thing. Yeah. It's like, oh wait, it's not an issue.
Not a concern. Not really. Unless you're going to gulp them.
Water kills you too if you drink too much of it.
If you try to breathe it.
Breathe it. Yeah.
But they are a quality complex carbohydrate, low on the glycemic index. So, they burn slowly and evenly. They contain fiber-resistant starch, which is good for gut health, fiber and resistant starch. But that fiber is actually a concern. So your intake timing has to be taken into consideration. Don't want to load up a system with fiber if you're going to go out and do an 8-hour Ironman or 10-hour Ironman. And they also contain oligosaccharides, which is basically what causes flatulence. So, our bodies don't really digest oligosaccharides. Anything that makes it out of the small intestine into the large intestine is going to create gas, and oligosaccharides is one of them. It's one type of sugar that does exactly that. High vitamin content, not a bad thing. And then the protein content, super favorable. I mean, it's usually along the lines of 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein. So there's a fair amount of protein in there, and it comes at a pretty good mix. And then finally, I mean, if it's working for you, go with God. If it ain't broke.
I would never eat beans before a ride like that. I mean, I eat them with meals, but I wouldn't have it like a pre-ride meal or snack, something like that.
I do all the time.
I've had it in
almost
quite a lot
lunch.
of things.
I don't because beans tear me up.
I think too, to your point about gut health, is the more you eat beans, the less they tear up your gut. Because your gut develops, I think, better to process them.
My gut's a little slow with that sort of thing. I think so.
Just got to keep pushing through. You got your own office. Close the door.
Open the window.
This is what I think might be happening, Max. I got a few ideas, and one of them is you say you eat a lot of carbs, but if you measure them, I think a lot of times people say they're doing one thing, but then when they actually measure it, they don't know. So 1 can of beans has 70 grams of carbs and 25 grams of fiber. So
a lot of fiber.
I know, but if you're eating 100 grams 3 hours before your ride, that you're probably going to have a really good workout. I'm saying you're probably not eating just beans. Like you're eating something else. I also, I don't have any science to back this up. Okay. But I believe that, like I say, I have a little, things with fiber or complex carbs load better than simple carbs. And I know there was a study before that like brown rice loads better than bread because bread digests faster. There's more surface area. You get a bigger spike where I think I talked about it a really long time.
Versus high glycemic.
Yeah, the carb trickle. Yep. Long time listeners heard me talk about that. So when you put all this fiber in your system too with the carbs, I feel like it stretches it out better and you absorb it better. If someone has any study to show that, because I could be 100% wrong.
Makes perfect sense.
Because of the brown rice to bread thing, that's what I bring it up to.
Yeah.
It might happen. So that's why I like to eat lots of fiber all the time. I feel like you get really...
even right before ride, like morning before a race, that sort of thing too?
Yeah, sometimes. I feel like you just get really regular. And sometimes when you don't, then you won't go to the bathroom right before the race. But if I'm do it every day and I eat all this fiber, I always go to the bathroom before the race. Yeah. And I lose, 15 pounds.
So you're very regular.
You get to be extra regular so you don't have anything in your system. Where if you eat a lot of fiber and then the morning of you don't eat any fiber, then right before the race, I'm like, nothing's coming out. And then I'm like, that's going to come out, especially if you're an Ironman. It's going to come out somewhere on the course. But bike riding, I don't know, it's never been a concern.
I don't like to take in high fiber things before the morning of a race, before a race.
But if you're indoor training,
anything else like
who cares?
Yeah, even that, no, I just don't like to do it. I feel like it doesn't help. Like bananas, for example, like before a race, never do too well for me. I don't like them. I'd much rather have something that's simple.
This is why you like cream of wheat now.
Yeah, exactly right. That's why I've been sticking to cream of wheat the morning of a race. It's lower in fiber. It seems to work fantastic. What do you have? Don't you usually have like toast and honey, something like that?
No, I'll do that if I don't have 3 to 4 hours, I will do cinnamon raisin bread with honey immediately before an indoor workout.
Yeah.
But for a race, I always wake up early.
Yeah.
And I do Ezekiel cereal, muesli. When I travel, I love doing muesli because you don't have to cook it. Yeah. So Bob's Red Mill muesli, and it has some raisins and oats, just raw oats and stuff. Yeah. Something like that.
Chad, your pre-race meal that you like?
I'm still working on that. Still haven't quite
nailed it.
Historically,
I'm good the night before. I mean, the night before, I just have whatever I want, which is typically
pizza and ice cream.
Pre-indulgent. Yeah, exactly.
You said that before on the podcast.
No, it works great for me too. I load up, but the next morning, often I skip, and sometimes it comes at the expense of my performance. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends. I think because I've changed my diet in pretty severe ways in the past, I've gotten to a point where I don't metabolize carbohydrate as well as I used to. So when I try to ingest that on a ride, it creates problems. When I try to ingest it pre-ride, it creates problems. So it's a bit more delicate of a balance with me than I think it might be for many people.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to
just push through it.
Still trying to work that out. Yeah.
It's not like it's something that will change over time too. Like like you said, Nate, you train your gut, so to speak. And it will change over time for sure. Right now, for me though, it's cream of wheat, and then I just throw in berries usually into that cream of wheat and a bit of brown sugar.
When I switched from my, the hot fire burns anything Popeyes diet to fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes diet.
Yeah.
There's about a 2-week period where it was just gas city. Yeah. Eating all those vegetables and stuff, and now it's a lot better. Same with tartare juice. At first it was gas city, and now it's better. Another in the U.S., the burrito, the lunch burrito, I think is super underrated.
I do too. Absolutely.
It's a specific brand here, Qdoba in the U.S. has a whole wheat tortilla. You can have black or pinto beans. You can have brown rice. You can have fajita vegetables, and then choice of meat if you want meat.
Fajita vegetables are just grilled, usually red and green peppers with onion.
Yep. And then you can put in that's great vitamin stuff in there. You can put in corn if you want to. Different salsas with tomatoes.
A lot of vegetables. Yeah.
And you can add onions and then jalapenos.
It's great.
It's like 5 pounds of food by the time they're done with it.
And then you can put in there too. You can add lettuce, which a lot of people there's all these things at the end. So you can have brown rice, like legumes, lettuce. It's like a salad pretty much. But then the whole wheat tortilla also has a bunch of fiber in it too.
Yep.
And it's to go. It's easy, and you can always get a bowl. But I like the handheld package.
Yeah, it's awesome. Burritos are the best.
Yeah.
That's why handlebar bags were
burritos.
invented. They're really just burrito bags. They're not handlebar bags.
Now, are burritos huge in Europe? Maybe someone can answer, but
I don't
like
think
in
so.
the U.S., they're huge.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Burritos and tacos
I didn't
everywhere.
eat any in Italy. I didn't see a burrito in Italy.
Yeah.
I didn't look real hard, but
It's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be without burritos is to be without happiness.
I'd say every day at TrainerRoad, someone's eating a burrito. Like at lunch.
Every Monday we have like a massive burrito order we do. We live on
it's
them.
a staple of my diet.
If you have a burrito recipe you want to share with us, go to forum.trainerroad.com.
There's not many. It's like
Yeah, there's some
it's
interesting
beans,
ones.
rice, and
Sushi burritos.
Oh, yeah, like that.
The
We had
vegan
sushi burritos in Reno, yeah.
Some really good vegan burrito ones too.
broccoli
Yeah,
and
totally.
sweet potato burritos at a
Oh,
barbecue
yeah.
place. Yeah.
It's a very
Really
flexible food. Yeah, you can do a lot with the burrito.
Yep. Carl
That's really-
says, "Hey guys, I saw the same tactic you described from the Mike Spikes team in a Cat 4 race, which you discussed in podcast 203 in a recent race of mine. A team of 6 or so riders took turns attacking off the front. Eventually someone would chase and bring it back. Then they go again. No gripes on my end. It's a great strategy to spread the work around. My question is, what's a decent tactic for this scenario when you don't have a team in the race?" Or he says, "In the race, I waited until near the end and jumped with a later counter from the dominating team. The field, with mostly solo riders, eventually pulled that dominating team back, or that dominating attack back, and I went with the next move from the dominant team. The problem is that a few people had the same idea, and we ended up getting no separation, just stringing the bunch out and finishing in a bunch sprint, at which I suck. Then at the very next race, the same team rolls up 5 deep and did the same thing again, except this time they were neutralizing the field hard. And what he means by that is they were shutting down attacks and, like we said, occupying the front of that field and kind of dictating the pace, right? After they let their rider get the gap, they shut down absolutely everything, and the front of that field was closed tighter than a gnat's behind. We censored that one.
Yeah, he didn't say behind.
He says their man solos off the front for 15 minutes and takes the victory. So what do you do in this case when it's neutralized that hard and they're chasing absolutely everything down? When, once again, you don't have a team to do that.
Yes, keep playing the same cards he was playing. He was covering attacks, hoping that he went with the right one.
Yeah.
I mean, if they keep sending a rider up the road, you just got to get lucky. Go with the right one. If they have that many cards to play, you don't know what's going to be the one that
They're gonna make a
has an
mistake.
impact.
Eventually, they're gonna make a mistake.
Well, and then this guy got away, so why he could just as well have been with that guy if that's the attack he had chosen to cover.
Yeah, exactly. Something interesting with this is you mentioned that in the previous week they did this, then again they did it. Psychologically, a lot of the time that defeats you because you see the same thing happen the next week. They're doing this again.
But their intention is to get one of those guys up the road and keep him there. So you just you're gambling.
And as a team,
most likely, or they're just trying to cook everybody. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
As a team, that's exactly what, if I was on that team, I want you to think that every single week we are going to show up and do the same darn thing and we are going to neutralize you.
Why wouldn't you?
And you might as well give up, right? So why in the world would you think like what they want you to think like? Like, don't think that way. You can't give up. And no matter how many times somebody in that team of 5, let's say, somebody in that team of 5 that day is not feeling good, relatively speaking. And if you guys keep attacking them, keep going, one of them is going to make a mistake. They will not be able to counter your move. They won't be able to follow you, and it's going to happen. You just have to keep trying. You can't. Giving up is never a solid strategy.
Yeah, every rider is beatable. Every rider is beatable. Every team is beatable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna. Never mind. I asked Pete this question, and he had some good thoughts. I have my own thoughts too, but one, Pete said that you got to. If it helps if you can know the competition of the team,
Sure,
because they could be sending out
Composition.
Yeah. Are these people the heavy hitters that are going out or not? And I've seen both happen with Mike Spikes. If it's a heavy hitter going out, you guys are exactly right. Like you got to get in a breakaway with that person.
Totally.
And then in my brain, if I'm in a breakaway with that person, if you think that you can win, or like if second place is your goal, who cares? But if you think you can beat this person, then you pull. But if you don't think you can beat this person, I actually wouldn't pull.
Yeah,
I'd
if
be
they've
like,
got a team sitting back there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't think you can beat the person in the breakaway, and you really want to win, don't pull. I would just wait for the next one.
No incentive to pull.
You will frustrate that person to no end, and you
They'll
say,
yell at you.
"Welcome to the club."
Exactly right.
Because you're doing that to me too.
Yep.
Jeff Linder just had a one with that where he wasn't pulling the breakaway, and I think it was a Mike Spike guy yelling at him.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And I personally don't like that in a race when someone says those things, but it's going to happen. Like 100% going to happen, and you just have to be okay with it. And I feel, Chad, I think you're like this. You don't even need to explain yourself. Like,
don't say anything.
No.
I find I end up pissing away a bunch of energy when I do too. I get too wound up and cycle or emotionally invested in a situation that merits no emotion.
they're trying to goad you into doing more work.
Oh, yeah.
And even just responding is doing more work.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite. You don't respond, they get frustrated. In that,
Let them build up the cognitive load. Why don't you keep yours low?
there's a video we have of what to do when you bridge to a breakaway, and someone was yelling at me to do that, and I was just too tired to pull. And I was just about to start pulling again, and he went from the back of the field, got frustrated, went to the front and started pulling.
And you're like, yeah, why would I pull for you?
Well, no, I was like,
Like, into that.
if he would have waited 30 more seconds, I would have been through. But so that's one thing. Another one is if they are just sending off like lower level, not their big hitters, to tire out the field. Then kind of all the, like, you can just let it kind of go and you see it coming back, and you can kind of just tell of how far they get in front. With Mike's bikes,
They're kind of fake attacks.
yeah, exactly. They're fake attacks, right? And they're trying to burn up the field. The other one is this is what Pete's saying too here, is sometimes though, they have 6 riders, they're all strong, and they're just covering everything for the sprint. It's frustrating, and it can be really hard to get away. And I wouldn't even, maybe there's the long bomb, but I wouldn't even use energy. It makes the whole race kind of boring, but I wouldn't use energy to go away if I know that 6 people are going to chase me each time.
It depends, though. I've seen really a good, strong group of riders be broken down by just a bunch of little gnats, so to speak, just constantly attacking those small things. And it depends on what you're racing for, right? Like, if you're there to just get caught up in the chess game and lose sight on the end goal, sure, don't attack. But I think that when you're racing, you should go for things and you should try things. And if you don't win, but you tried extremely hard and you tried to break down that team, that's something you should be proud of. And
but I think in line with what Pete said, if you know the composition of the team, you know who you have to worry about. If it's a 6-man team and you know 3 of those guys are strong guys, well, then you're still playing the odds. Then you still have a 1 in 3 chance of covering the right move.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to take chances for sure. I mean, even if you're never going to know, even if it's their strongest guy and that one gets up the road, that's not to say that break's not going to come back, and then the second strongest guy is going to go, and that's the move you should have covered. So there's still there's no assurances whatsoever. You have to be willing to take some risks and do some work.
But the gnat thing, you can't be the only gnat against 6.
Exactly right. If you're the only one, you can do that, but your goals better be just to get in a good workout, right? Like
exactly.
But because you're not going to be able to overpower.
But so if you see lots of other solo riders attacking, that's definitely the time to go into it to break them down.
Because think about the uncertainty in their mind. They suddenly have a bunch of people that have zero allegiance to anybody, and they have to go against them.
Yep.
So it makes it much more complex because you don't know if anybody's working together, if they are working together. So it's actually more complex for the team. And a lot of that comes down to your relationship with the other riders and how you manage that. Because yelling at other riders to pull and to attack everything else isn't really going to be effective either. They have to be on the same page.
I find it just happens or it doesn't happen.
Yep.
And when you have 20, it could be 6 versus 20 then, right?
Yeah.
And then they're trying to cover everything, and they get super tired and they get burnt up. Yep. I've seen Mike's bikes do this tactic in lots of races, and they still don't win.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's not a
win's not guaranteed.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And a lot of times too, if they're doing this the whole time, and then for the sprint, they're super tired. So if you've been saving it the whole time, and then you do either a long bomb or you're in better position for the sprint, because they've been covering moves and attacking the whole race.
Yeah, and ideally they have one guy reserved for the sprint. So out of those 6 guys, maybe one of them hasn't attacked yet, and you know who that guy is. Well, maybe that's the guy you cover if it comes down to a bunch sprint.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, definitely. If they do have a team that's controlling and one guy isn't chasing anything back, especially if you know that's a threat, that's where you want to be.
Sure.
Or
take the last lap flyer. That's the rider you want to cover.
Exactly. All right, so let's head over to see if we have any live questions. We had some audio problems, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. So let's see if we have any live questions. Sounds like it. Okay. Oh, somebody says my go-to pre-workout snack is Medjool dates. Dates have a ton of sugar in them for sure.
I don't like that. Whenever I do those dates right before,
Yeah.
I get a spike and I get a crash and I feel shaky.
Yeah,
Like
I
right
feel like
before,
they
like 10
spike
minutes
me.
before even?
Yeah, like right afterwards, yes. Like I think it's a great like boot afterwards, even in between, but right before I get a little like low glycemic shake.
Huh. Yeah, if it's right before the race, it's darn near like a gel for me, and it's just like a quick
delicious.
one. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, especially the coconut ones. They have those like coconut ball ones you can buy.
Yeah,
those things are amazing.
I haven't used those in a race.
Yeah. I don't know if the coconut would be very good, but yeah, whatever. Let's see. Okay, scrolling through.
Aaron says only one Chipotle in the whole UK.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Chipotle's okay. But yeah. So somebody says, Dion says, how important really are those millimeters of change in your bike fit when we're talking about the changing of your performance, that sort of thing? He says, these very small adjustments to your position, do they actually make a change in your performance? This kind of an interesting thing so I mean, if you've ever gotten like a really good bike fit, a lot of the time it would be, very small movements and you'll see a change in performance. Mm-hmm. But when I went out to that stage race in Utah, two of the riders that we were with, Ryan Standish, I think Sophia Gomez Villafania, but they had recently gotten bike fits by a really renowned bike fitter out in Park City. I'll try to think of the name and put it into the forum. I like the way he fits. Like the just fits look good, especially on mountain biking. They aren't too far behind the saddle because that's a big problem with mountain biking. Seat tube angles are getting steeper, so that's getting better. But I think that if you make these small changes, you shouldn't expect to see instant improvements in performance. Like you have to get used to that position.
You have to be
to a certain degree
way off the mark if a small change
Yes.
or if a change is going to bring about a big boost in improvement.
Yeah, because Ryan Standish was talking about this. He's like, yeah, I got that new bike fit. And he said, he's like, I do think it's better, he said, but I'm just not sure I'm executing as I
not used to it
would
yet.
usually execute in that position yet. I just need to work into it. And I think that there's a certain element of that. So when you do make these changes, don't just expect to be like plus 15 watts or whatever else. It can take some time. So
I got one from Grant. When eating for work expended or like recovery, should I consider kilojoules or kcals? For example, if I am due to, I'll just stop it right there. Grant, I don't know what these should be the same thing. So if you have a power meter, we talked about this last week, kJs and calories should be the same. Go back to last episode for the explanation, or I think we have a blog article on it. You can Google that. But if you might be looking at heart rate or something, or some other softwares like Estimate. It's usually based off heart rate. Don't look at that. Just look at the kilojoules, and that should be the same. And definitely, if you do a 5,000 kilojoule day versus a 1,000 kilojoule day, they take different amounts of recovery, and your body will just tell you though, right? Like your body says, "Hey, I'm really hungry."
Oh yeah.
But it's be aware, right? Because I don't know I think people really get that stuck in their head about how much they should eat, and they get scared about eating stuff. But you should know that if you did a bigger day, it makes sense to eat more, but not everyone does that.
Yeah, and you don't have to replenish every single calorie you burned. I mean, if you're trying to come back to level, that'd be an okay approach, I suppose, but you don't have to put it all back in.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Let's see. Okay, somebody says, hey guys, thanks for the live stream. How does a 1 rep max of a 600-pound deadlift and 450-pound front squat help a cyclist? Does having high maximal
Probably
strength
doesn't.
translate to an endurance sport?
Maybe a track cyclist.
Yeah?
Yeah, for the dead start. But
Right.
beyond that, probably not much at all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the extreme end of things. I mean,
Those are big numbers.
Those are big strength athlete numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't think that's going to carry over to endurance all that well at all.
And you can, we see this in
A lot of
in
mass
practice
goes with that too.
all the time, where both ways, the best cyclists can't do that, and
Yep.
the best weightlifters can't cycle as
We'll
fast.
never
as
be the
cyclists.
best of both.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
argue
like-
that to my dying day. There's just no way.
There's and we've covered this many times on the podcast. We are firm believers in the benefits of strength training for cyclists, and not just for injury prevention, but for performance improvement as well. But on that scale, that's pretty high.
Yeah, super high
need to go
1
that.
RM is going to require a big athlete with a ton of muscle mass, and carrying around that much muscle mass on a bicycle is seldom, if ever, going to be useful.
Brian asks, enjoying the podcast, Jonathan, is there a type of compression sock that you use or recommend?
I don't know much about compression socks. I just have some Swiftwick ones. I'm sure that triathletes or somebody else in the forum could jump in and provide much more information.
So they're
The
I know-
2XU is pretty good.
Yeah, I use that too, but you can actually
They do wear out. I can say that much too. Mine aren't as compressive as they once were. I'm going to be getting new ones.
someone from one of these companies will correct me, I'm sure. But you can go to a drugstore and get hair compression socks that
And pro tip on this,
yeah.
they used to come in gross like skin tones. Now they come in black at Walmart. They have
nice.
them there. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have to be graduated though, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that the big requirement?
That's
You
what
can
they
look
say.
at it like I don't know, but they have the exact same for what is it, millimeters of mercury? I forget what the exact measurement is, but whatever whatever it's probably not that, but I forget what it is.
I didn't even know it was
whatever the
measured.
measurement is, you can go get them because old people have been wearing these for years.
Exactly.
But for athletes, it's $70 for a pair of socks, right?
Yeah.
There's a local,
But you
physical
get the
therapist,
logo on it.
Kyle Dixon, many-time
yeah.
national champion. He's worn those for years, and he always makes fun of people who spend big dollars on compression socks.
Oh yeah.
But I'm
exactly,
sure
yeah.
there's I don't know. I'm sure someone, a
Compression
marketing
sock
person will
company
be
is
like,
typing quickly to us right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
These are all the reasons.
Yeah.
And please correct me because I could totally be wrong.
Right.
I probably am wrong.
A big day when they came out in black instead of the weird skin tones. That was good.
It's a good day for all you budget compression sock wearers.
Yeah, exactly. So Rocky Bull, I hope that's how you say your name. I apologize if not. Please say something about the recovery process in between stages in a multi-stage race. As you can check out our adventures or misadventures from Single Track 6. You can check that one out. We actually did a mountain bike stage race, and you can see how that went. Then we kind of break it down thereafter. And I also shared some tips recently that I saw the pros enacting there at that Soho Bike Fest, the stage race out in Utah. But really the recovery process in between stages of multi-stage race, I feel like the priority is get nutrition in as soon as you possibly can, get off your feet as much as you can, plan ahead so that you can be as lazy as possible, intentionally lazy as possible. So you just don't need to go to the store to get something, go to the bike shop and get something, get up and walk around. Make sure that you have the optimal idea or ability to just lay down and relax.
Yeah. During the event, eat often, drink often. Keep in mind you're fueling for the next stage.
Yeah, great point.
Can't think of anything else.
Yeah. Oh, temperature control. If you're able to make sure that you can recover in a cool place, please do that. That will definitely help you a lot.
Cold, wet towels go a long way.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, we'll just take a couple more. I don't know if you have one over there, Nate. Somebody says, any tips on preventing nausea when in a low TT position? I noticed that the lower neutral torso angle causes me to frequently want to lose my burrito. I'm not sure if there's I've never experienced this. Have either of you experienced that?
No.
Go to forum.trainerroad.com if you have experienced such a thing, and then let us know how you've dealt with that. I've never experienced nausea in relation to position, only in effort.
Yeah.
Next question. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Tim has a question. How do I prevent stitches? I tend to suffer these on shorter TTs, 10 miles. So stitches meaning you get these too when you're running, like the side aches.
Like a side cramp almost. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I used to get these a ton. And what has worked for me and may not work for everyone is it was actually like my psoas, and that's hard to spell. It's PSOAS. But it's they don't spell it that way, or it doesn't sound like
P
it's
silent.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's probably a person or something, but it's a psoas muscle,
Short
and it's
for iliopsoas. It's probably Latin, I'm guessing.
So if you reach in,
Good guess.
the middle, there's the middle
part
of
of
your,
it,
there's that
so.
line down the middle of your abs, right? If
Yep.
you have low enough body fat, and then if you go to the right or left just a little bit, there is a muscle that runs in there that kind of connects. I'm probably getting this all wrong, but to your above your right, like underneath your rib cage, and down kind of right.
Your psoas is your lumbar spine to your anterior superior iliac spine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So for all of those who don't know where that is, and then
connects to the lower four vertebrae.
So your
contours
pelvis to your low
around.
back.
So let me continue, guys. Thank you. Everyone,
kidding.
get out your books.
I'm just getting more confused by Nate
And if you
pressing
go,
on his chest.
if you go down, you can follow it and kind of the outside of your belly button, but then the inside of your hip flexor. And if you push on it, you can actually kind of feel it, like if you dig into your abs.
It's hard to get to it. We should say this, like for a lot of people to get to that, it's hard to get in there. You have to wiggle past some stuff. So.
Yep. So you can kind of push into it, and if you push up and down, you can feel like these, at least for me, these tight tender spots. And what I have had luck as a massage therapist, he did it, but I also learned how to do it, is you kind of push down on that, and just like I've talked before in the IT band, you push down till it hurts and you let up a little bit, and you like lay on a bed until you relax and it feels like it releases. Also stretching your hip flexors.
That's one of them.
It's all connected. Yeah.
The psoas is one of them. So your hip flexor, your iliopsoas, and your rectus femoris. So that's one of them. The psoas in particular, and it's a deep muscle. So another way to get at it is to take a lacrosse ball and something heavy like a kettlebell and smash it. So find it, and you can find it by flexing your knee, digging around for it, finding where there's tension. Put the the ball on the muscle and then set a heavy kettlebell on it. And sometimes the weight itself is enough.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to move it around. Sometimes you have to press it into it. But it's a deep muscle that's hard to get at. Once you find it, though, it's wondrous.
Usually if you're with the massage therapist, they'll be, it's going for this specific thing. They'll kind of put their hand, find the spot where they need to be. Then they'll kind of like press and work and wait, press and work and wait, just trying to get deeper enough so that they can really get to it to get through a lot of the other, more superficial muscles that you have there that are sitting over the top.
Yeah, it's a hip flexor, so it probably goes low back to femur. I gotta look it up.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, so all the layman's though, when you think of hip flexors, you think about the part right above your quad. It's like that little muscle right there.
Well, that's the more
portion of it.
overt one. But yeah.
And then,
your
Chad, what's that
rectus femoris.
stick you just bought? I bought that for my wife, the blue stick.
Selfie massager.
Selfie massager.
Sounds a
It's
little
got a weird
questionable.
name.
Okay.
But no, look it up.
It looks like a
should link
big
to it.
blue candy
It's almost
cane.
like a question mark candy cane. Yeah.
Yep.
And that thing,
one of those
when
things.
we went up to Powder Creek, they had one, and I just started messing with it. I use that thing every day, and now I have one, and it is maybe the single best tool. It's so useful.
So I think you could get your psoas with that. By
yes.
putting on it and
Absolutely.
then pulling.
Yeah.
So
and you could weight it if you needed to, but that would find the spot real well.
they're like $12.
Super cheap, 20
15,
bucks,
20 bucks,
18.99.
yeah. That's a great, I gave it to my wife for Mother's Day, and she instantly, so when you put it on too, you got to pull, and she was like, what is this? Oh.
You can get spots you just
Husband,
can't
you're the best.
get with other things. You don't have to lay on the floor either. I mean, just sit there and work it into hard to get spots.
So
Yep.
Tim, that's what I would do, and especially stretch out those flexors, because that's what I find when I'm really tight, and you sit at a desk all day, and then you get side stitches during a TT, and that's the worst. You don't want to be. You prevent your performance because of a cramping in your abdominal region. It's just bad.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. And we will be coming back live once again next week. That'll be Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We're looking forward to seeing you all there. You can join us on Facebook and YouTube. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends, but also please share TrainerRoad. Let people know what we're doing here. And we've got exciting things coming out all the time with TrainerRoad. You can stay tuned to forum.trainerroad.com. And of course, download the app, keep it updated, and you'll see all those new things too, which is pretty exciting. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks everybody.
Bye bye.